My name is Klin Deng. I'm the Professional Development Chair for NAAAP-Seattle.
My name's Alex Trung. I am the Business Development Chair for NAAP.
So I am Venus Rekow, the founder of Neuroleadership, a consulting firm that bridges the gap between science and leadership.
Which is a machine that measures the blood activity and determines what part of the brain is working.
Hi, I'm Joe Beer. I'm the Chief Architect for Puget Sound Energy.
My name's Will Pang. I'm a systems engineer at Boeing.
Diversity creates strength for any organization.
So diversity and culture in the workplace allows people to share
Views, having the freedom for each employee to express themselves.
So I want to say I'm also a member of NAAP, been a member for 5 years, and I find it's a valuable organization to make contact
with people in the professional field.
I want the audience to know that adopting a growth mindset can allow you to go very far places in life. And a fixed mindset can limit you from becoming who you really want to be.
So put your heart and brain together and give a warm welcome to our speaker, Venus Rekow.
Thank you everyone for being here. I am very excited. I'm a neuroscience geek. I hope you're too, so we can talk about neuroscience after this talk. But to start with the logistics, please turn your cell phones off on mute. And I'm going to share this mailing list. If you're interested in getting a copy of my talk today or any research that I'm going to be using, I'll be happy to forward that to you. So I'm going to start talking about leadership and how I define it. For me, leadership is the ability to influence and mobilize people and ideas. And why is this important? Well, nowadays, organizational structures are changing, and leadership responsibilities are now part of the whole organization. So if you look at this survey that was done of over 300,000 managers and subordinates, you will see that leadership skills such as developing others and inspiring people are at the top of the scale. So you might be wondering, what is it about neuroscience and leadership? What's the connection? David Rock, which is a researcher and executive coach, was doing coaching and realized that some of the changes that he was seeing in organizations and people were reflected in some way in the research articles from cognitive neuroscience, social psychology, and neurophysiology. So he combined all this information and created a field which is called the Neuroleadership field. At this point, we don't have any leaders hooked up to fMRI machines, as you might be wondering. That would be great, but it's not the point. So what we do is we use research data to help leaders understand how people change, how they behave, and how they can be more effective at leading. He has combined data from collaboration, facilitation, change, decision-making, and emotion regulation. For tonight's talk, I'm going to focus on 3 areas. 1, emotion regulation. 2, decision-making. And 3, facilitating change. So before I go into this whole emotion regulation thing, let's take a quick 101 neuroscience test. Primarily, I'm going to be talking about the frontal lobe, this area of the brain. Let's see a mouse here, right here. This area of the brain that allows to think strategically, to make decisions, to have cognitive flexibility, the ability to change our plans, and also help us regulate our behavior. And the other area of the brain that I'll be talking a lot about is the temporal lobe. And here we have the limbic system. And this system, its job is to regulate threat and rewards. So we're constantly scanning the system for threat and reward. When you came into the room and you were meeting new people, your brain was constantly is trying to figure out, is this person a friend or an enemy in some way? So let me talk about how we use this in emotion regulation. So look at this app for a minute. 60,000 jobs lost in a single day. How do you feel if you were one of these persons? I saw some eyebrows raising. Terrified. Why do we feel terrified when something like this happens? Well, because our system is constantly scanning for threat and reward. And the first thing that we think when we see uncertainty is a threat. So we're going to be fearful. And what we're doing, and I want to say one of the things that we do with this system is that we're constantly assessing emotions. And we might run into a friend and say, hey, and a dopamine shot goes up and we're really happy. And then we go into a threat mode when we run into someone we don't really like or we had a conflict with. So how we regulate emotions under non-stressful conditions? Normally, like right now, you're not hopefully aroused or feeling threat by any means. So your brain is thinking and using the prefrontal cortex right here, this part of the brain, to talk with the rest of the brain and communicate. They do this beautiful dance because the brain doesn't work in silos and works in systems. So as you are regulating your emotions, your thoughts are, for the most part, are going to be logical thoughts. Now, what happens when you are under stress? When you're under stress, most likely the communication is going to happen bottom up. What that means is the amygdala is going to take over this communication. It's going to send signals to the prefrontal cortex. And when this happens, we normally are a little bit more emotional, more irrational, because our fears are going to come into place. So why is this important? Why do we want to regulate emotions? Well, research done by the Center of Creative Leadership found that 1/3 of leaders fail or plateau in their careers when they are unable to regulate emotion. One thing that I'd like to point out is that in the Asian American culture, emotion regulation is highly valued. So that's something that you learn from a very early age. And learning to regulate emotions is not something that you learn overnight. It's something that you practice throughout your life. Why do we want to point out this beautiful dance in terms of what we do under stress and what we do under non-stressful conditions? Well, because the good news is we do have the power to regulate these emotions. And some of us learn early on and some of us learn later on. But we do know that if you don't learn to regulate your emotions, you can set threat signals to a lot of people. You know, if you're managing people and you are constantly getting off the handle, people are going to be upset with you and are probably not going to be enjoying working with you. Nowadays, as a coach, I help people to learn ways to regulate emotions. One of the things that the brain does very well is that it keeps negative emotions. You know, when you run into someone you don't like, or you talk to someone and have a disagreement, what happens in your head is you're normally replaying that over and over again. We ruminate. So learning a different technique that can help you eliminate that ruminating could be helpful in helping you be effective as a leader. So I'm going to give you a scenario. Imagine that you walk into the office and your boss walks in by. He didn't say hi to you. What's your first thought?
Busy.
Okay. So, right, so somebody say might be busy, somebody say he's mad. Well, because of our brain is always looking for threats, it's very likely that we're going to assess the situation as something negative, and we're going to think he is upset with us. So what do we do when we have this situation? He's upset with us. Well, normally that will generate a feeling right here. And the feeling when he's upset is we're now freaking out because what did I do? Yeah, and it's probably not a good feeling. And what is the action? We might ruminate. We might think about it all day. What did I do? How can I talk to him? But what can you do when that's the story that you tell yourself? Well, according to research, one of the things that you can do is reframe or reappraise. The best way to lower your emotions is to think about them from a third party's view. So imagine that somebody else was sitting in the room and watching this interaction. What will be an alternative possibility of what does that person see when this was happening? What the person probably saw, and let's put an alternative, is that your boss was running pretty late and maybe he didn't notice you, he didn't see you. Well, if you think about that's the alternative, then the emotion is going to be different. Now you're going to be hanging into this emotion because if your boss didn't see you, now you know it's not about you. And what will be the action? Well, perhaps you're not going to be ruminating. You're not going to be thinking about how am I going to talk to my boss because he's upset with me. So think about how you could use reappraisal or reframing in your everyday situations to eliminate negative emotions. So for a lot of people, and I would say including me, managing and adapting to change is not the easiest thing. You know, who would say change is my best friend? Raise your hand. Great. Great. Few people. So what happens with change is that when we initiate change, we're happy we initiated this situation. But when change happens to us, we're normally not very happy because now we don't know how to adapt to these changes. So there was a researcher, her name is Eleanor Maguire from the College of London, and she was very interested in understanding how the hippocampus, this area right here that looks like a seahorse, and is normally known for helping us with memory and spatial regulation. It's like your GPS. So she was interested in understanding how the brain of taxi drivers was functioning. And why was she interested? Because she noticed that squirrels had larger hippocampal areas. And one of the things that squirrels do is they grab food and they hide it. And they have to somehow remember how to get back to that food. So she suspected that that was something people whose job is to find directions will do. They might have a larger hippocampal area. So she asked people from London, specifically, who were going to enter the taxi training program to scan their brains before they started the program. She followed them for 40 years. And what she noticed was that people who successfully became a taxi driver, apparently something very intellectually challenging to do in London, only 50% of those passed, were able to have a larger hippocampal area, specifically the back part of the brain, right here, the anterior part of the hippocampus. Other parts of the brain were fine, but that part was significantly larger. She noticed there was more gray matter. So why does this matter? Well, we a lot of times think people don't change. That's a saying we have. Yeah, people don't change. But the fact is that we can change. It just takes time and effort. A scientist from Stanford University, Carol Dweck, used this information about neuroplasticity and devised a study with the students in New York. There was a group of students in New York who were studying math. And what she did is she divided two groups. One group learned about neuroplasticity. If you know about the brain, how the brain can change, you put the time and effort, you're going to be able to accomplish your goals in math. The other group was taught nothing. The only thing that they got was study aids to figure out how they can study. So what was the outcome of that? The outcome was that the students who were told that the brain could change actually outperformed those who didn't have that information. And as she replicated this study over and over again, she noticed that there was a pattern. And she called it an adapted pattern or a maladapted pattern of motivation. With that, she decided that one way to call this would be a growth mindset and a fixed mindset. She noted that those who knew about the brain being able to morph and change adopted an attitude that was positive towards change. So when they thought about uncertainty and change, they knew that they could continue to do their work. They gave more value to time and effort. Another thing that they did is that when they saw somebody else succeed, they felt inspired by someone else's success. What happened with people who had a fixed mindset? Well, those with a fixed mindset normally think that their intelligence is fixed, that they can change anything. And they're really afraid of failure. So for that reason, they don't try new things. They feel a little bit incompetent about getting to new things. And when they see success by others, their brain says, threat, threat, because if somebody else is succeeding, that means I'm not doing very well. So now think for a minute, what part of your life can you adopt a growth mindset into? We all have a growth mindset and a fixed mindset. There are various areas in our life in which we might adopt one or the other. Let me give you an example of someone who I'm thankful, and you will be thankful for, that had a growth mindset. That was Thomas Edison. And he was quoted by saying, I have not failed. I have just found 10,000 ways that won't work. So let's going back to how do we change? Okay, now we can tell that our brain structurally can change. But what about how we adapt that behavior? Well, when we think about change, the first thing that flashes in our brains, and normally pictures, because we have maps in our brains, is loss, difficulty, challenge, and we equal that to change, which makes it that we resist change. And we might resist it in different ways. We might don't tell someone that we don't like the change, but we just don't adopt it. Or we might create the water cooler gossip about the new changes in our organization. David Rock noticed that one of the things that we do very well is stay connected with one another. And he looked into the research from Naomi Eisenberg and Matthew Lieberman about pain. And what he found was that they devised a study in which they asked people to be hooked up to an fMRI machine, which is a machine that measures the blood activity and determines what part of the brain is working. And what people were doing is they were playing ball, what they call cyberball. And if you look in here, people were playing ball back and forth here with another person. Suddenly, while they were playing, they got excluded from the game. There were only 2 people playing. And what the researchers found was very significant. The area of the brain that lights up for physical pain, when you are in pain, dying, crying, the same area actually light up when they got rejected, when they got excluded from the game. So think about when you are managing change in organizations or within your life, in what ways are you including or excluding people from those changes? Now, David Rock used all the data to come out with a model, which he called the SCARF model. And a SCARF, like a scarf, I know my accent is pretty. But okay, so I'm gonna go over this SCARF model. We're always looking for threat and reward. And he decided that one of the factors that drive us, and not everybody is driven by the same factor, but some of the factors are status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness, and fairness. So how does this work? Let's play that you just got hired. You got a new job. If you're driven by status, the first thing that you're going to be thinking is, who is my boss and who is below me? Because you're trying to figure out, where do I stack up? This is very primal, by the way. If you are driven by certainty, you're going to be worrying about whether or not the orientation is going to last all day. Did someone tell you how long is the orientation? How long are you going to be in this position? When will we take breaks? Those things are going to be popping up for you. If you're driven by autonomy, you're going to be thinking, okay, can I take a break right now? Where can I flex in this orientation process? You want to be able to take control. That's a need that you have. And if you're driven by relatedness, connecting to other people is going to be very important to you. So you're going to be thinking, I just show up to this job, who likes me, who doesn't like me? Or how do I belong? Do I belong in this group, or am I an outsider? The other thing that you might be thinking about is fairness. You're always going to be looking at equality. Is this fair? I noticed that some people were here only for half an hour. Doesn't seem very fair. I was here for a full hour. And so think about this model in a very fluid way. When one of the needs gets met, for instance, let's say you're thinking about status, am I the nurse or am I the doctor? Soon as that need is met, then you're going to be thinking, okay, what about certainty? How long am I going to be here for? So when you are thinking about instituting change in organizations, you want to keep this in mind, because what you want to do is help people reduce the threat level. Because when people feel threat, they're going to disengage and try really hard to resist the changes. There are two things that you can do. One is help people understand the changes. Many times when changes happen in organizations, people say, we had this change and everything is going to be okay. Don't worry. And what you want to do is actually be transparent and tell people about the pain and the cost that these changes may have, and also the benefits. Help them understand and navigate this environment. Another thing that you can do is help them be part of the change. When people collaborate with you and co-create, they're not gonna see you as an outsider. They're gonna resist less the change that you're trying to implement, because they're part of it. They're thinking about it. And the other thing that you can do is think about autonomy. How much control can you really give to people about the change? Now let's move into decision making. And I'm going to use a little cultural lens for these. When you look at this picture, what do you see? If I say, is Donald Bitzer a leader or an engineer? What are your thoughts?
Based on those attributes.
Okay. What about how Ty? I'm sorry.
You can be a good leader if you're too aggressive.
Okay.
Good leaders that I know of are not obviously aggressive, assertive.
Okay. What about how Ty? Is he a leader or an engineer?
He's a very stereotypical engineer.
Okay.
Now let's find engineer attributes.
He's a lead engineer.
Okay. Well, as a matter of fact, he's actually a leader engineer. He leads the Ford Foundation. He leads the engineering team at Ford. And Donald Bitzer is also an engineer. He is the person who developed the plasma TV. So why do we judge both one of them to be a leader and the other one to be an engineer? Well, our brain works based on maps, and we use a lot of biases. And biases are great things for us to make. It's judgments and assumptions that we use to make decisions so we can be fast. However, when bias get in the way is when we make these type of decisions. We think that somebody else based on that picture is an engineer. So if we think about, okay, this is a common thing. All my Asian friends are really good in math.
But that's true.
I wish I looked Asian because I'm not very good at math. So when we think about, we have those stereotypes, those biases. We think math, dedicated, engineer, and we put a picture around it. And most likely it's going to be someone who is Asian American. Then we think, okay, confident, assertive, leader. And because of the context in which we're in, we're going to attach it to a Caucasian person. So there was research conducted by Thomas Tsai at UCLA that was looking at these stereotypes. And specifically, he wanted to understand how we judge people. So what he did is he gave people a description of a person, and the only thing he changed was the name. It was an Asian name or a Caucasian name. And what he did also was added the race, whether they're Caucasian or they're Asian. And what he asked them to do is, can you judge the occupational fit of this person? Would this person be a good engineer, or would this person be a good salesperson, or maybe a leader? And what he found was that most people judge Asian Americans to be good engineers, highly competent, very good, but not so good for the sales position. And what Caucasians were judged to be amazing for the sales position, but not so good for the technical position. So if you're Caucasian and you're applying to an engineering job, you have to prove yourself a little bit more. So what's interesting about this research is that one of the ways that we can overcome these biases is by really engaging our prefrontal cortex, by going beyond what the reflexes of our brains says, that we just say, okay, this is an engineer. Well, actually, we need to question our quick and easy beliefs. What I found interesting in this research is that when I noticed that NPR actually listed this study as Asians are not charismatic. And I was like, that's interesting, because when I read the study, I didn't read anything about charisma. But those are the myths, and that's how things get propagated. Another thing that I looked, when I looked at perceptions of Asian Americans and Caucasians, I found that there was a study by a woman at UCLA, her name was Arpi, and she found that some of the same biases or stereotypes that we use to judge people based on context, we use our context. The American system has most people are white, so we match, we do like a lottery thing. And what she noticed was that Asian Americans were lowering their aspirations or their expectations of getting to positions of leadership because they didn't feel that they fit in. You think, okay, aggressive, no, not aggressive. Assertive, maybe. And then every time you do this quick matching, it lowers your ability to think about what are your real capabilities. Can you really be a leader?